Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel. Each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. This week we're going to be working with some mystery wood. Now I was given this probably 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And at the time I was told that this is ironwood. So I've only turned ironwood once before and it looks similar to it, but I'm not 100% sure. One thing is for sure, this little piece of wood's pretty heavy, so I'm thinking that it probably is. So anyway, let's get over to the bench and we'll figure out where we're going to cut this piece. I should be able to get 2, possibly even 3 castings out of this one block. So let's do that. This thing's heavy. All right, so when it comes to casting pieces, this should be really nice. I don't know if the camera's picking that up or not, but there's lots of nice curly grain in the upper part of this. Too bad it's kind of destroyed. On the bottom of this piece, you can see that ripply grain under the bark. If the camera hits that correctly. So there should be lots of figurative grain down here. This is an odd shape to work with. That's kind of how I was thinking I might cast this. Lop this off here, and we'll probably cut this knot grower off as well, because we can probably reincorporate that into something. And then, you know, here and here you've got hopefully 2 pieces, or you know, 1 strong casting anyway. Anyway, it's I don't want to go through the hassle of cleaning all the bark off this until we first get our cut made, and it's just going to be easier to do. Might even end up splitting this right down the center and then inverting the natural edges together. But first things first, we're going to cut this off. I think this is it. You know what, off camera I've looked at this a number of ways to try and figure out the best way to cut it. I'm not 100, you know, I don't like the fact that there's going to be a straight line here, but if we cut it like this, then hopefully that's not going to be too big of a factor. I don't know. We're going to have to just cut this off, and then we'll have to go from there. This bottom piece here, it's not flat, so I might try and cut that flat so that we've got a nice flat surface for this to sit in the bucket. You only get 1 shot at this, so you got to make sure that you do it correctly. And the other issue is cutting it off safely too on the bandsaw. Probably just like that, I'm assuming. All right, let's get over the bandsaw, figure this out. I'd like to personally thank you all for stopping in to watch this video. And if you're not aware, I do upload every 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays with a new video. And I turn my videos into premieres, and that way we can use the live chat function and talk about the piece as it's being built. So yes, you know what? You only get 1 shot at cutting this up and cutting it up correctly. If you don't, then you can certainly run into problems, and that's kind of what it looks like on the inside. The very, very limited experience that I have with ironwood, the ironwood that grows here in Canada anyway, is that it's usually a pretty bland grain. But after cutting this open, you can see that there's lots of chatoyance going to be happening in this piece, so I'm pretty happy about that. I could have busted out my circle cutting jig. I figured this is just as easy to do. If I'm doing a lot of production stuff, then I certainly would pull out the circle cutting jig, but this here is a simple, easy way to get the job done as well. And of course, the template that I'm using, I have a whole bunch of different sized buckets, so I make templates to fit in the bucket. That way, of course, you can just put it on the top of what you're working on, and hopefully when you get done cutting it on the bandsaw, it fits nicely inside the bucket. Now, again, the bark has got to come off these pieces. You should never cast anything that has bark on it. The reason for that is, of course, the bark can delaminate from the from the wood, and then of course you could have a failure later on. However, the bark was on this, and I mean it was on there good. So I figured that what I would do is I take it over to the belt sander and grind off the majority of the bark. Yeah, that's a pretty decent job. And then when that's done, we'll be able to move over to the lathe where I've got a 40 grit flap sander mounted on the Jacob's chuck and be able to clean up these pieces. I know that some people give me questions or ask questions in regards to why it's important to remove the bark, but that's it in a nutshell. You just don't want the epoxy to be adherent to the bark and not the wood itself. You'll also see sections here where there's a little bit of the inner bark left on this piece. I think that's fine because we're going to be using deep cast. A deep cast will wick through that and we shouldn't have any problems. Alright, so when I originally cut these, I was going to put this one on the bottom, but this one in fact has the nicer amount of grain in it, nice feathered grain there. So we're going to use this as our top piece. And so we're going to have a little bit of space around the outside, and this is going to be our bottom. Again, not as thick and it's not as curly as the top piece is, so that's why I'm putting this one on the bottom. Still has some nice curl in it though. All right, there we go. I'm hoping that that's going to hold that. I don't have to put a weight on it. Just in case there might be a resin collar on the top of this, let's mix up the resin. Since this is a deep pour, we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. This casting I think is around 6 inches deep, something like that. So using a deep casting epoxy is very important. And like I said last week, we're going to be using the new Hypershift Gold Red and Light Purple from Designer Epoxy, all by itself without any other pigment with it. So I'm hoping this will give a really cool look, and I think it does. There you go. I think I've got enough in there. I don't know if we need any more than that or not, but you can kind of, it's interesting because, you know, you can see the gold, red, and there is some light purples in there too. It's pretty cool, actually. All right, let's get our pour going here. All right, I would have liked to have seen that sitting in there a little flatter, but that's where it wants to sit. And I don't know, I'm worried about it shifting afterwards, so we're just going to have to live with it. Anyway, I'm sure that this is probably not going to be enough, but let's find out here. Yeah. It's going to take at least another one of those. I'll bring it back when I'm ready. All right, here's another 1.5 liters. Hoping this is going to do it. It's important that we got a reservoir on the top for this to pull from, so I think that should be okay. We're going to forego the vacuum chamber today. It's a pretty solid piece of wood. Those cracks are large enough that I think that we shouldn't have any issues. I'm going to throw this in a pressure pot. We'll see you guys in 72 hours. Ended up getting a crack in this. That's why there's resin everywhere. Good morning. It's actually, I think, 5 days later. Took a little bit of a 2-day break here, but we're back at it today. I don't see any thermal cracking. This is a fairly deep pour too. What are we at here? Almost 6.5 inches. All right, let's. I'm going to snap these pieces off here, and then let's get this out and have a look at it. So as you watch me remove this from the bucket, I just wanted to point something out. When the epoxy was in its liquid form there, you could see if you look at the side of the bucket, it's actually a gold color, and of course, looking down from the top is a total different color. I really like these Hypershifts. Give them a go. They're really awesome. Ooh, that's going to be pretty. No thermal cracking. Awesome. So as you watch me find the centers here, I just wanted to point out or make a point that ordinarily when I'm using deep cast, the wood is going to absorb some of that. And in this case, the wood absorbed very little of it. So that also is an indication to me that we are in fact dealing with ironwood here. It certainly is hard enough to be ironwood, so I really think it is. That's probably as good as we're going to get it. Starting off here at 750 RPM. When I put those wedges in there, it was a little oblong, so I thought that we wouldn't be able to get to this speed when I first started. But it was actually balanced pretty nicely. And again, you can see that gold sheen on the outside of this piece as I'm trimming it away. We are using the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems. And like it always is, I'm going to strip off the excess epoxy here. Because the top one is technically a little smaller than the bottom one because they're reversed. So we're going to have to whittle away a little bit more of this than I'd like to. But, you know, it just, after everything was all kind of cleaned off it and I was looking at them and saying, okay, it's probably better to have the bottom on the top and vice versa. So that's just how it is. A lot of times you're not going to notice that until you've got things cleaned up. And that was the case this time around as well. One of the great things about doing these voiceovers is that we can talk about last week's project. And if you missed it, I will link it at the end of this video. But essentially I took 2 pieces of very rotten pencil line spalted maple and combined them together with Designer Epoxy's 5 new hyper shifts, the colored hyper shifts. And I called it the Pot of Gold bowl. I probably should have called it the Pot of Bronze bowl because it certainly looks more bronzy than gold. Really surprised at how many people thought it was really green dominant. And you know, I can totally see where they're coming from, but you know, in person it's probably more bronzy. Anyway, I just looked at it yesterday and I don't know if it's a thing, but it seems to be getting darker. I don't know if that's even possible, but I just found that interesting. But anyway, thanks to those who watched that last week. The video performed well. Thank you very much. And like I said, I'll link it at the end of this video if you missed it. So if you look over, well, it was over my left shoulder, there's a big stack of white casting buckets. And those are ice cream buckets. I got a hold of Mount Molson Dairy Bar here in Petawawa and asked them what they were doing with their leftover ice cream buckets. And she said that they typically just recycle them. So I said, I'm looking for some. Can you set them aside? And when I showed up to get them, she had 70 of them waiting for me. And I was like, wow, thanks, but I just don't need 70 casting buckets. So I did take 20. So thanks again. I was talking to Zoe there at Mount Molson Dairy Bar here in Petawawa, and great ice cream and a great source for casting buckets. So I think that I've mentioned this in the past. The reason why I like those buckets is because they're nice and deep. So when they're in the vacuum chamber, things don't tend to flow over as easily. So anyway, hit up your local roadside ice cream vendors. They may be able to help you out and get some really cool casting buckets. So for those of you who are not aware of it, my wife and I are selling our current home and moving to the east coast of Canada, where we were both originally from, the province of New Brunswick. And so here's your weekly house selling update. Nothing to report. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. We did have a stager in. We shot new pictures. Hopefully those are going to be up on the MLS website here quite quickly. And anyway, thanks to Linda, she came in and staged the house, and I think that she did a fantastic job of it. So we'll see if that translates to any visits for people that are looking for a house. But anyway, we're still in a holding pattern, and that's all there is to report on that. Still waiting. Now, if you watched last week's video, you know that the waste block came off the bottom of the piece that I was working on when I was trying to get the core out of it. And I said at that time that I was going to try white birch. So that's what this is. So I'm just cutting up a bunch of waste blocks so that they're prepped and ready to go. And when I, spoiler alert, when I did first initially use this one here, I did find that the chuck really did bite down good on it. So I was quite confident that it wasn't going to come off the lathe. So after I cut these up, I typically just run them on the 60 grit belt sander here just to flatten one side. And then that way, there's no point in really flattening the other side because you're going to be trimming that away anyway. But I'm thinking that this might be the way to go here in the future. And that's an old pepper mill blank that I had kicking around. Yes, pepper mills. And well, it was cut in 2011, so I think that it's good and dry. So when I reverse this, I'm predominantly just clamping down on resin here. So you can't really get a good bite on that. So it's really important to take light cuts here when you're doing something like this. And then I hit it with some 60 grit just to give it a real good tooth. And then my first attempt was a bit of a failure. Cracked right in half. So I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't the way to go. So anyway, I got another one. I don't know. It was just one of those things. Anyway, I think I just was torquing it down too quickly, and the block just couldn't take the hydraulic pressure from the hot melt glue. And of course, that is melted hot melt glue, high temperature hot melt glue in an electric frying pan. Lots of volume. Don't spare the volume if you're going to use this method. Anyway, and the other thing too is make sure that your tenon is shorter than the profile of your jaws or your chuck, so that it doesn't bottom out in the base of the chuck when you tighten it down. You want the very top of the jaws to contact the bottom of the casting you're working on. And that's just a go, no-go gauge. So now I'm just going to take this over and ground it off there. That was pretty quick. And I could have left that on there because that will go into the kind of the hole of the chuck, but I prefer to grind it off. That way when you do take it out of the chuck, you can set it down on the bench. So now we're up to 1,000 RPM. Some of you are going to be wondering how this was cutting, and I would say that it's probably comparable to hard maple burl. That's probably where I would put this. Certainly with a sharp cutter, there would be no issues cutting this. It did dull the cutter fairly quickly, as this was a newer one that I'll have to swap out a little later on. Well, what do you think so far? This resin, when it's polished, is going to look really awesome. Still got a little bit of ghosting to take care of here. And I think what we're going to do with this piece is taper this off to a small foot. And one of the reasons for that is these two knots that are on the end here. Hopefully by doing that, we'll delete that and it'll be a little fatter on the upper end. And I think I'm going to get rid of the collar as well. So we'll just sweep that in and we'll make a hollow form out of this. I will say that a lot of times I can identify wood by smell, because each wood kind of has a distinctive smell. And this smells like birch. It is 100% not birch because it is very, very hard. So I'm assuming that it must be ironwood because it's not a species that I'm really familiar with. And I've turned, in Canada, I've turned the majority of the hardwoods that we have here. So I do believe that it's ironwood, but there's lots of chatoyance in this piece. So this will still remain. Of course, we'll get rid of this ghosting, but taper this off to a small foot, a little larger on the top, but I'm going to sweep it all in and then we'll drill this out. So I've got a couple of real-time clips going up here, and I'm going to show you a difference between a dull cutter and a sharp cutter. Right now you can see there's not a whole lot going on. I'm using the same speed, same sort of pressure. Well, it's not the same speed because I can't really cut it that fast. So what I did was I rotated the cutter. I didn't change this cutter. I actually rotated it to a fresh edge, and immediately there's a big difference in the way this thing is cutting. And of course, the other benefit to this is you're not going to generate as much heat, and you're also going to get a nicer surface from a sharp cutter, as you would all expect to get one. So don't push your cutters past their limits, because really all that's going to happen is you're going to get some torno grain, and there's going to be so much heat generated from the friction of the dull cutter that eventually the tool will get so hot that you can have a hard time holding on to it. The tool will let you know when you need to swap out the cutters, and there's nothing worse than working with dull tools. We've all been there, but trying to push things past their limits usually doesn't work out. So we've exposed a little bit of a void, not a big deal. I think I throw some Starbond in that a little later on. Didn't delete the two knots, but at least they're closer together. It's I think that I've talked about this in the past. My business has completely changed since coming to YouTube and now working with a lot of epoxy projects. Still the inlay stuff is still there, but to be honest with you, like I'm really kind of running out of inlay ideas. So I would make more inlaid projects here on the channel, but after all the videos that I've shot with all the materials that I've used, for me it's kind of starting to dry up a bit. So I'll take your suggestions as far as inlays are concerned, and maybe we'll see them here on the channel. But it's funny how my business has completely changed. I mean, when I was on the road doing shows, I was for all intents and purposes, I was a salad bowl maker. That's pretty much my job description, what I did for a living. But of course I did inlays in the top of the bowl, so it made them unique from others. But now I want pieces of wood that are absolutely gnarly looking, and just the weird and wacky things when they're cast with a resin really make awesome looking things. So here you can see I've switched back to the Ellsworth gouge. I was having a real hard time cutting that really curly grain cleanly. So here I'm doing some shear scraping, and it does a really good job in this regard. And yes, you can do this with resin as well. But there you can see, like, it's compared to the other surface, it's cut very nicely. So in the future, if you're having issues cutting really difficult curly grain cleanly, and this applies to soft grain too, like birch and butternut and these kind of softer hardwoods. This is another method where you can really cut that surface cleanly. So give it a try. And this is why you should also know how to use the bowl gouge and master the bowl gouge along with the Hercules, especially if you're going to be using, if you're going to be doing resin casting like I do. I must say that in recent history, I haven't really had to do a whole lot of shear scraping. The Hercules has been there through and through, but this is a special piece of wood that, this is probably a little bit more on the more advanced side as far as, look, you don't have to get a clean surface, but you may be spending hours sanding. that's your alternative. So I don't know about you guys, but I'd sooner be turning than sanding, and I'd rather be turning than cleaning my workshop too. That's the other thing that I'm a firm believer in as well. As you may note when you look at the zoomed out views of my workshop. There you go. We're on the downward sweep that seemed to cut really cleanly. Still have that little void to deal with. I don't even know if I show it on here, but I did use some thin Starbond to fill that. It wasn't very deep at all. I could have possibly even trimmed that away a little further. So I'm going to start off here with an 1 1/8, or I think it was an 1 1/16 Forstner bit, and then we step it up to a 2-inch before we get ready to do some hollowing. I will say prior to drilling this piece that I was wondering if it was going to be nothing but smoke coming off the Forstner bits while I was doing it, but I was pleasantly surprised. It actually cut fairly nicely. New bits help. We're all set up and ready for hollowing. This is the retrofit tool from Hunter Tool Systems. And of course, this is the captive hollowing system from oneway.ca with my modified laser setup. And right now, this is what we're set at. Really don't need it. Goal here is to open this up, give us some room, and hopefully we'll be able to stick with the straight bore bar and the double bent bar. Let's do it. Surprisingly, this also cut very cleanly with the retrofit tool. I did put a new cutter on it prior to starting this, so that certainly didn't hurt it any, that's for sure. But I was actually kind of really surprised at how easily this cut. I seem to have worked with other species that gave me a lot more fits trying to cut it cleanly on the inside. But this cut actually quite nicely. So like I said, the goal here is just to open this form up so that you don't have to stop every 2 seconds to clean out the inside of this. Didn't really get an opportunity to work with the straight bore and bar all that much. I did fit the retrofit tool onto the double bent arm here, and it doesn't really, there's not a lot of contact surface, but it seemed to work fine, and it didn't come loose. So we certainly will be seeing more of this in the future. And again, there's not a ton of footage here. There's not really a whole lot that you guys can really see what's going on. Just a couple of views inside, panned out, and closer views like this. But you can see that thing is making shavings better than the Hercules was. So I was very happy to see that, because I thought that this was going to be a bit more of a fight than it actually was. One thing that I would really like to get my hands on is some desert ironwood. I've seen some examples of desert ironwood, and unfortunately, well, you're not going to find that here in Canada. So I think maybe down in Arizona might be one of the spots in Texas you might be able to find that. But anyway, it's a beautiful species of wood that I've seen anyway, and I'd love to get my hands on it. So if you guys have a source for desert ironwood, please leave it in the comments down below so that I can order some and get it on the lathe for you here, because it's truly beautiful stuff. It's definitely tight getting the retrofit tool in there. Any smaller hole, I'm not sure that I would have been able to use it in there. That's really not a good idea to do that, to work on that opening with that tool. I found that it tore the grain up more than anything. A little later on, you'll see me work it by hand. But, I was like, I got to try this. And anyway, just lucky that I didn't get a bad catch, which would not have been cool at this point, because we're getting close to being done. Here I'm setting the very final top thickness. So that's what I'm doing there. And again, the whole idea of this laser setup, if you've never seen it before, when the laser drops off the side of the form or elongates on the side of the form, then you've achieved the wall thickness that you have set between the laser and the cutter. That's how this works. You can see the light shining through that too. So we're getting a little thin, so soon will be time to move on to sanding. All right, I thought I'd show you guys inside of this piece before we start sanding. Won't be doing any sanding on the inside, only on the outside and around the opening here. It's actually cut pretty clean, but I will say that you can see that curly grain in there, and that is very difficult to cut clean. But looks pretty good. Since I'm left-handed, it's easier for me to run the lathe in reverse to clean up the opening here. I never even should have tried this with the retrofit tool. You're putting the tool in and out of the form. It's going to mark up the edge. So this is typically one of the things that I do last. And then you're going to see me essentially shear scrape the entire form. Again, for whatever reason, it just wasn't working all that great with the Hercules. So, you know, really glad that I've got this in my inventory that I can use it when I need to. And yeah, I do the whole form this way. So as you watch me do this, I mean, sometimes you might even see where the tool is almost straight up and down. And you know what that's going to give you is those, you know, the long cutting edge is essentially cutting it off like a razor blade, really. And that's how you can really get a really nice surface with this type of a cut. So yeah, if you're, you know, working with difficult wood, this is certainly the way to go as your final last pass prior to sanding. Highly recommend it. And there you go, no tear out, ready for sandpaper. Speaking of sandpaper, these are the 3.5-inch dipple discs from sandpaper.ca. Again, we're going to be doing an epoxy coat on this piece. So I'm sanding from 60 to 180 just on the outside of the form and the very opening and as far in as I can reach. Everything that I had was too small to get in to sand the very bottom of this. But like I said earlier, I'm reasonably happy with the way the surface looks on the inside of this piece. All right, we're going to be doing an epoxy coat. This is 3 ounces of the Pro Series from Designer Epoxy. If you wish, you can use Art Cast to do this as well. I like using the Pro Series because it's so thin. Penetrates well. I'll leave that for about, I don't know, probably 5 minutes, and I'll bring it back and we'll do the outside coat. If you're new to my channel and this is the first video you've watched, that is a silicone barbecue brush. And I'm mainly using that to control how much volume I'm putting on. After that, I'll take my gloved hand and rub it into any little cracks that are left on the surface. And this seems to be the most effective way when doing an epoxy coat. Well, there you go. I must say it looks very nice with just the hyper shift. Lots of really nice grain on the top of this as well. And there's actually lots of really nice grain down below too. Domed just slightly. Very cool. You can see the wood below or in the resin because it's not really mixed as strong as I usually do. If the camera's going to pick that up or not. Yeah, there it is. Awesome. See you tomorrow for the first coat of Waterlux. Let me know in the comments what you think about this beauty. I like it. See you tomorrow. Well, all right, it is the next day. Here's what we're looking at. For the most part, I think everything's been filled in. Yeah, a few bubbles here and there. No big deal. All right, we're going to start sanding at 180. We're going to go all the way to 800. So one thing that I would probably change up on this is I would mix the pigment a little stronger than I did. I think I put 3/4 teaspoons in there. I think next time when I do one of these pure hypershift projects, I'll use 5 just to bling it up a little bit more than what this one was. That is the Triple E buffing compound from the Beal buffing system. And once that's all done, we'll be able to clean this up with denatured alcohol and get our first coat of Waterlux on. All right, this is the first coat of Waterlux Gloss. Received a number of questions about what RPM I'm turning at. I don't have a digital readout, but if I had to guess, it's between 60 to 80 RPM when applying finishes like this. Well, there it is, its first coat of Waterlux. Must say it looks pretty good. It will probably only need one more. What do you think of that hyper shift? You can see the gold in there too. Especially when you're looking this way on this side. You can see it, I find, anyway. Really nice chatoyance on the top here. All this area. Very nice. Right, well anyway, I'll put another coat on it. I'll do it exactly the same as I just did this one. And we'll see you when we're doing the bottom. Let me know in the comments what you think. So after 2 coats of finish, we're finally ready to mount this piece, and I'm using the vacuum chuck to do this. Again, I highly recommend getting one of these if you do any amount of turning. It will certainly make your turning experience more enjoyable and allow you to be more versatile on the lathe. So we're going to clean this up with the Ellsworth gouge and then sand this piece from 120 to 400. I did decide to engrave this piece. I don't usually do that, but it works on this piece, so that's what I'm doing here. All right, well, thank you all to those who watched the entire video, and special thanks to the membership. I really do appreciate your support. Let's have a last little chat about this week's project. Well, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this beauty. I love putting these natural edge to natural edge pieces together to make these hollow forms. You can definitely see the gold in it when you look at it a certain way. Like when I look from the inside out, it's really gold. No, not. It's kind of a mean face right there. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Look. There's the top. Again, lots of really nice grain in this piece. There's what the inside looks like. Epoxy pooled right in the very bottom, like I like. That way it strengthens the bottom. Here is, orientate this the right way. There is the very bottom. When the finish goes on, this will stand out more. I think I wanted to go in this direction because there's actually some really nice grain on the bottom of this. So if you had it written all over it with the black pen, it may not look as nice. So that's why the engraving was done. And you know, when it's all solid wood or all solid resin, that's typically when you'll see me do the engraving. Size on this piece is 7.5 inches across, 5 1/4 inches tall. And it's a little thinner on the top, I'd say about 1/4 inch, and then it tapers down into a 1/2 inch for the rest of the piece. And I will say that this piece is for sale. If you're interested, send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will disclose the price then. Beautiful little hollow form. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the 3-gallon giveaway at 130,000 when we get there. We're finally over 126,000, so we're on our way. And of course, that's only open to continental USA and Canada. Sorry, the rest of the world, we can't accommodate you at this time. And if you want, you can embed that designer epoxy into your comment for my bowl giveaway. And yes, I give products away at every 10,000 now. So once we get to 130,000 subscribers, we'll do the giveaway for the epoxy and also the project that I make that week. So please comment it away, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If your name is selected for my draw, I will ship it to you at my expense worldwide. So please comment. All right, well, that's it. I don't know what we're doing next week. Haven't even gotten the pressure pot yet. Kind of panicking because today's Thursday. So that's just, that's the life of a resin caster here on YouTube. That's what it seems to be for me anyway. It's, I'm trying to get videos ahead, but it's virtually impossible. It seems to be that way. All right, well, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. And thanks again to the membership, and we'll see you next week. Take care.